It's my pleasure today to tell you a little bit about how to bolster your immune system and which natural safe substances might be helpful in protecting you from a severe case of COVID-19. My name is Steve Blake, and my most recent book is Beyond the Mask: How to Survive COVID-19. I have written many other books too. One of the things that we've learned about COVID-19 is that the most severe cases seem to be in people who have hypertension, diabetes, or heart disease. And I can bring to your attention that I have written a book, for instance, on diabetes breakthrough, the key to insulin resistance, that can help you to defeat diabetes and regain your health. For high blood pressure, I would recommend my book, Stop Strokes. And this is available also on my website, www.drsteveblake.com. I have a book called No More Heart Attacks that can help you to heal your heart disease. As you can see, I have many other publications, including the McGraw-Hill College textbook, Vitamins and Minerals Demystified. This talks a lot about the essential vitamins and minerals, something that seems to be missing in the current public information and medical information on how to strengthen your immune system, and I'll be talking about that during my talk. My name is Steve Blake. I'm a doctor of science in nutritional biochemistry. I am the director of nutritional neuroscience currently at the Maui Memory Clinic. I'm the lead author for the Macmillan Reference Gale Encyclopedia of Alternative Remedies and director of the Neuroscience Nutrition Foundation. When you look at the infections that occur with COVID-19, you see that about 80% of them are either mild or moderate. Now, moderate is no fun. Moderate means you may have symptoms of coughing, difficulty breathing, but not bad enough to be hospitalized. That's the worst that I would want anyone to get with COVID-19. My hope is that you would be having very mild symptoms or no symptoms at all, and that's why I've made this presentation for you today. We do need to continue to keep social distancing. We need to wear masks and wash our hands, but sooner or later, we are likely to encounter COVID-19. And when we do, I want you to have a nice light case and stay away from that ventilator. So today we're going to learn about how to reduce the risk of a cytokine storm. You may have heard about this inflammatory condition that causes much of the damage in COVID-19. We also are going to learn about safe, natural constituents of foods and spices that stop COVID-19 from attaching to our cells. Now, this virus cannot propagate inside our bodies without replicating inside our cells, and there are certain food components that stop this, and I'll be telling you about those. I do want to mention the nutrients that are so powerful in bolstering our immune system. We know that COVID-19 is much more deadly in older folks than it is in younger folks, and principally this is a function of the immune system, which can become less powerful as we age. This age-related decrease in immune power can be reversed with certain nutrients, and I'll be telling you about these nutrients as we go along. And I'll mention some scientifically validated plants too. All of my solutions are safe. Anything that achieves these goals that's not safe, I'm not going to tell you about tonight. We just keep it safe. And also, everything I say is based on good science. Now, let's talk about inflammation and cytokine storms. What's one of the main reasons why people die from COVID-19 is this massive inflammation that occurs. Our first immune response is the innate immune system. And this attacks the area where the virus is, say in the lungs, and it just floods the area with inflammation. Now, this is a good thing in a short-term mode, but when it continues, the inflammatory components can build up in our lungs and have difficulty being cleared by our capillaries and arterioles and arteries out of the lungs, have difficulty being cleared through the kidneys too, especially for people with diabetes. So this is all about cytokines, the cytokine storm. So what is a cytokine? Well, the first group of cytokines actually attract inflammatory components into the area that needs the inflammation to fight the infection. This is our first response. I'm also going to talk about the second response. Chemokines and lymphokines are examples that attract the inflammation to a certain area where you're infected. There's also interferon, and virus-infected cells release interferon. It's also used as a drug sometimes, but naturally our virus-infected cells release interferon to warn surrounding cells that there's a problem. Interleukins is a large class of inflammatory cytokines. Interleukin 1, interleukin 6, interleukin 10, there's lots of them. And most of them increase inflammation. There's one more I'll mention that's a cytokine with an odd name, tumor necrosis factor. Tumor necrosis factor increases inflammation, it's undesirable. So what can we do about all this? By the way, at the bottom of this screen, you'll see that I have a citation, and you'll see these on the bottom of almost every screen during this presentation. This is from the journal The Lancet in 2020, and it's about cytokine storm syndromes and immunosuppression. When we first encounter the virus, which is called SARS-CoV-2, okay, a severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 19, or coronavirus 2, because it's the second severe acute respiratory syndrome that we've run into. The virus is called SARS-2, the disease is called Covid-19. For the sake of today, I'll usually refer to it as Covid-19 to keep the acronyms to a minimum. It takes several days for our adaptive immune system to adapt to the problem of infection. And so during these days, we want to keep the inflammation down as much as we can to avoid the cytokine storm that is so deadly. What can we do? Quercetin is found in red onions, red grapes, apples, berries, beans. Quercetin is a polyphenol flavanol that is the most abundant in most diets of all the polyphenols. This is what we get the most of, especially if we eat these kind of fresh foods. Other fresh whole plant foods have it too. Quercetin acts in many ways to reduce inflammation. Perhaps the most powerful is by reducing phospholipase. So for some brief science here, phospholipase is able to take the membrane phospholipids and extract arachidonic acid. This then is turned through the interesting intermediary of hydroperoxyeicotetraenoic acid into inflammatory leukotrienes. That's a mouthful. These inflammatory leukotrienes greatly contribute to cytokine storm. So one thing you can do is continue to keep your inflammation down by eating these anti-inflammatory quercetin-containing foods. We can also reduce inflammation with turmeric, which is very well known. Green tea is powerful for reducing inflammation, and also chamomile tea. There is a class of vegetables called the cruciferous vegetables, and they all contain sulforaphane. So kale, collards, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cabbage, these all have this sulforaphane. And the sulforaphane is very powerful anti-inflammatory. It directly inhibits cytokines. It also stops nuclear factor-kappa B, which I'll tell you more about in a minute, which is kind of the master inflammatory control agent in the body. Did you know that soy products lower inflammation? I do recommend only organic soy products because of the heavy spraying that they often get, and the possibility that genetically modified soy products, which are not allowed to be organic, could be detrimental to our health. Genistein quenches inflammation and LOX. Now LOX is lipoxygenase, and lipoxygenase is in that arachidonic acid cascade I mentioned, and it creates the inflammatory leukotrienes. The genistein and diastein that's found in the soy products directly suppresses cytokines, with interleukin 6 and tumor necrosis factor both being lowered by these foods. Now I'm going to mention kind of a long word and then the abbreviation. The abbreviation is PPAR-gamma. Peroxisome proliferator activated receptor gamma is the long name. Let's stick with PPAR-gamma. You don't really have to learn this. I'm going to tell you the foods that activate this and why that's good. A diet rich in foods, herbs, and spices that activate this PPAR-gamma can greatly reduce inflammation and the risk of a cytokine storm. PPAR-gamma controls this nuclear factor kappa B that I mentioned, and I'll mention again and tell you more about it. It also increases antioxidant enzymes to protect us from the fallout of our own immune system damaging our bodies with oxidation. Now, the nuclear factor kappa B it has nothing to do with nuclear bombs. It has to do with the nucleus of the cell and transcription of DNA into RNA. So the nuclear factor kappa B can actually greatly increase our inflammation by increasing cytokine production. It can be triggered by stress. Cytokines themselves trigger it, endotoxins, which I will mention in a little while, and free radicals. And you can get a vicious cycle if your cytokines are triggering the nuclear factor kappa B, and then the kappa B is creating more cytokines, and on and on. So what activates it to reduce inflammation? Turmeric has curcumin and other curcuminoids that do that. Thyme, oregano, rosemary, and sage are all Mediterranean herbs and spices that are widely used in cooking that contain carvacrol and carnosol. And these compounds have been found to activate PPAR-gamma to reduce inflammation. Hot peppers, grapes with their resveratrol, pomegranates with the fucinic acid, and lemongrass shown here has citral, which is the aromatic component that makes it just smell so wonderful. Another way to defeat systemic inflammation is to keep your omega-3, omega-6 balance just right. I think a lot of you already know that. Plant omega-3s reduce inflammation. Examples of sources would be flax, walnut, perilla seeds, chia, and hemp. Flax and walnuts and perilla seeds are the most powerful. Also, you need to eliminate arachidonic acid from the diet. Arachidonic acid is the most powerful omega-6. And it's found in all animal fat, highest in turkey, chicken, and eggs. In fact, here's a little diagram. The arachidonic acid through the lipoxygenase enzymes creates pain, inflammation, and also fever, by the way, through prostaglandins. But on the other hand, the omega-3s reduce pain, inflammation, and fever. So it's a good idea to keep this balance just right. Now, many people recommend fish oil as an omega-3, but it's commonly contaminated with polychlorinated biphenyls, DDT, and mercury. Also dioxins and many other persistent organic pollutants. Fish oil is also rancid, and the rancidity is a real problem. Rancid oils can increase the rates of cancer. So we want to be very careful about that. 91% of fish oil was found rancid at the factory before it was even processed, stored, or put into your store or taken home. There's another way we can reduce systemic inflammation, and that's by avoiding endotoxins. It's fascinating. These endotoxins have another name, lipopolysaccharides. When scientists want to test an anti-inflammatory drug on rats, what do? They give them endotoxins so that they get inflamed, and they test the drug on it. They're the leftover parts of bacterial cells, and when they enter your bloodstream, which they do with a high-fat diet of any animal product, they trigger our immune system and ramp up systemic inflammation for at least 2 to 3 hours after each meal. Many people eat these animal foods that are higher in fat every meal of the day, so their bodies are inflamed quite a lot. Certainly, if you're undergoing a cytokine storm in a hospital, you'd want to omit these. Another cause of systemic inflammation is advanced glycation endproducts. You can reduce your risk of a cytokine storm by avoiding barbecued, broiled, or fried meat, chicken, or fish, and also aged cheese has these molecules. They are very difficult for the body to eliminate, and they are detrimental, for instance, to the brain in cases of dementia. Where are they found? Chicken, bacon, beef, chicken, beef, and so on. These foods not only have advanced glycation end products, but they may contain organochlorines and other persistent organic pollutants. They may have rancid oils from the frying or cooking process. They may have harmine, which causes tremors. Essential tremor and even tremors in Parkinson's disease can be worsened by these. Of course, they have arachidonic acid, that nasty omega-6. They have endotoxins, which I mentioned, oxysterols, which are oxidized cholesterol and greatly increase inflammation, especially in the arteries. excess saturated fat, which increases the risk of heart disease and other problems. And they don't contain much in the way of anti-inflammatory content, in contrast to whole plant foods. So what we've learned about reducing the risk of a cytokine storm is, yes, continue the social distancing, eat plenty of whole plant foods so that we can build specific immunity to COVID-19 if we can keep the inflammation during the first week or two down, and then our T cells and our B cells and our antibodies can be developed to attack this directly. Concentrate on omega-3s, but avoid animal fats. Also avoid endotoxins by avoiding animal fats, and avoid those advanced glycation end products. I'm going to talk about how this enters the cell, and it enters it through the ACE2 receptor. And then inside the cell, it becomes RNA, where our bodies themselves, our cells themselves, create more viruses that are then released, many copies, into our system until the point where we have millions of these viruses going on. Can we interrupt that cycle? Can we do it safely and naturally and powerfully? The angiotensin converting enzyme 2 I'll refer to as ACE2. That's the receptor that the COVID spike protein actually attaches to. SARS-CoV-2 spike protein, if you want to be technical. We can reduce the binding. There's many foods, so let's get to them. This study in the Archives of Clinical Infectious Diseases this year noted that up to 100% inhibition of COVID-19 to attach to our cells was found for sweet cherries. Why not include some sweet cherries in our protective food? Up to 70% inhibition of viral attachment through this ACE2 receptor was also found for bitter orange and garlic. In another study, it was found that apigenin, which is a very common flavonoid, flavone, in foods, was found to stop COVID-19 binding even more than some antiviral drugs like nelfinavir. Apigenin is commonly found in celery, parsley, Chinese cabbage shown here, bell peppers, and guava. It's also found in some tea-making substances such as feverfew, chamomile, and passion flowers. This study was done in India, and they found that green tea has epigallocatechin gallate that was found to be the most active agent against COVID-19 binding. And turmeric and beta-glucan from whole oats also were found not only to stop the binding, but also to stop the replication. Now, the green tea only seemed to stop it for a few hours, so it would need to be repeated frequently. What's interesting in this study, they found that the oatmeal actually lasted for 24 hours protection. So it's a good way to can mix and match these ideas into oatmeal with berries, so you're getting your different substances that are protective all at once. We've heard of lectins, and certain lectins, like those found in licorice root and skullcap, can slow the attachment of COVID-19 to our cells, and then the cells can't replicate. They can cut attachment by 50%. Also, leeks can cut attachment very powerfully. Skullcap is an herb, and the Chinese skullcap is called Baikal skullcap, which contains bicolin, and it inhibited attachment to the cell for COVID-19 in a Chinese study. It also inhibited the main enzyme involved in the replication of COVID-19. One note is, if you do drink skullcap tea, you should not immediately drive a bulldozer. You should be in your pajamas and ready for bed if you're going to drink skullcap tea. It's very relaxing to the nervous system. Now, I mentioned quercetin before, but I'm going to mention it again. It reduces COVID spike binding to the ACE2 receptor. So you can look at the red onions, the red grapes, the berries, the beans, and the apples to reduce attachment opportunities for COVID-19. It seems that the infection of COVID-19 increases the number of ACE2 cell receptors, but quercetin lowers the number of ACE2 cell receptors, so it significantly decreased production of the disease, of further viruses, and this was a USA study. One more thing that reduces COVID spike binding is hispidulin. It's found in oregano, thyme, and sage, and it actually was found to be more powerful than the notorious drug hydroxychloroquine, which you may have heard of. Citrus and grape also contain something called resveratrol and rutin that disrupt the spike protein on COVID-19. And they're both very powerful. So you can eat grapes and citrus fruits and feel like you're protecting yourself to a very powerful extent. And this was in the Journal of Biomolecular Structure and Dynamics in 2020, peer-reviewed journal. So part 3, we've got to stop COVID-19 from multiplying in our cells. Without certain enzymes, it cannot replicate in our cells, and then the virus is gone. We can beat it if it doesn't keep replicating. Many modern studies are using binding energy to show which drugs and food components block the COVID-19 enzymes. For instance, the antiviral drug remdesivir, which is now the only approved treatment for COVID-19 in the US and Europe and other places, it scores 9 kcal per mole. But vitamin B2 also scores 9. A component of spirulina, very hard to pronounce, phycocyanocobalamin, scores even higher at 9.3, higher than the only approved drug. Isn't that interesting? I have a graph from the study that shows the binding energy and the ability to block the COVID-19 virus from replicating in our bodies. And I mentioned a couple of them. I want to mention cyanidin in grapes, in addition to the resveratrol that I've already talked about. Diazidine and genistein in soy both rate 8.4, 8.6. So they're very powerful in stopping replication. Catechins in tea, curcumin in turmeric, certain algae like astaxanthin, beta-carotene found widely in many plants. Also cayenne, ginger, vanilla beans, cloves, and thyme. These are all very protective. You could put these together into sort of an antiviral dish. Say organic tofu for genistein and diazidine, carrots for beta-carotene, spinach for vitamin B2, and ginger, turmeric, and thyme, both for protection and for taste. A molecular study was done in Indonesia that identified components in artichoke, luteolin, and turmeric, curcumin, and parsley, apigenin, and green tea again, catechins. They have the best potential to stop COVID-19 from replicating. Here's scutellarin found in skullcap, and I've mentioned this several times. It was found to be twice as powerful in inhibiting the ability of COVID-19 to reproduce compared to the antiviral drug nelfinavir. I do note that it makes you sleepy, because you could possibly combine it with green tea to offset the sleepy effects. Quercetin in another study was found to be a more potent inhibitor of COVID-19's main protease than the notorious hydroxychloroquine drug. It also inhibits the main protease to stop viral replication. So it's actually inhibiting 2 enzymes, this quercetin. So again, more grapes, red onions, apples, beans, and berries. Myricetin's a flavonoid, found to have almost 3 times the power to slow replication of COVID-19 compared to antiviral drug nelfinavir. It's found in tomatoes, fruits, nuts, berries, beans, and red wine. It's very similar to other components like fisetin, luteolin, and quercetin. There's a very interesting smell and flavor with grapefruit. Have you ever noticed that? Naringin is the name of the component, and it had more power to disrupt replication of COVID-19 than nelfinavir, the antiviral drug. Hesperidin, another citrus flavonoid, was found to be 3 times more powerful than the drug to inhibit replication of the COVID-19. An Algerian study found the glutathione, and pictured here we have some food sources, asparagus, various potatoes, and carrots that are high in glutathione. Also, biotin, a B vitamin, was an inhibitor. Thiamine, vitamin B1, powerfully able to stop the viral replication of COVID-19. And in this study, they found that vitamin E was able to inhibit the viral replication. Now, I want to talk about a new topic, and this is nutrients that boost immune function or restore immune function. What's unique about this, and most of the information I've already given you, is that you won't hear it on the news, and you won't hear it from your doctor. Now, why is this? It's because modern American medical doctors do not study nutrition in school. I wish they would. I wish my textbook were standard reading for them. They'd see how powerful these things are. The focus of modern medicine seems to be more on drugs, and many doctors do not realize how powerful these are. So doctors in the audience and everyone else, I'm going to tell you about these micronutrients. And micronutrients means vitamins and minerals usually. They're essential for immune power. Particularly important, and here's a list: vitamins A, C, D, E, B1, B2, B6, B12, folate, biotin 2, selenium, copper, and zinc. It is rare to get all of these from a diet in high enough quantities. I have a dietary software that I produce so that I can analyze diets and other people can analyze their diets too. And it will tell you exactly how much of each of these vitamins and minerals you get every day in your diet. And I know from looking over the diets that I have analyzed, even my own, that it's very difficult to get the right amount of each of these every single day. If you do take supplements, they need to be in the right quantity and the right form. Looking at elders who are at highest risk for getting severe COVID-19 and dying, they looked at elders. Now, they looked at the plasma of elders. They weren't guessing. They were looking very carefully. Elders, 61% had low zinc, 68% had low selenium, and 75% had low vitamin C in their plasma. Multivitamin mineral supplementation reduced viral infections by 1/3 to 2/3 in this study, and in another study, the multivitamin mineral supplements reduced infection in patients in their 80s by 1/2 or more. Isn't that interesting? Would you like to be healthy and old or unhealthy and old? Because being really healthy means your immune system is powerful. And multivitamins reverse the age-related decline of white blood cells. This includes T helper cells. Remember, T helper cells are very powerful in remembering for our bodies which are the bad viruses so we can attack them quickly next time we are exposed to them. Also, white blood cells include monocytes, macrophages, which eat up or gobble up the bad cells that are infected, and dendritic cells. Multivitamins improved immune system power, also improving natural killer cells. The natural killer cells remove the infected cells that are replicating viruses. This is from the journal Clinical Infectious Diseases. Now, vitamin A is crucial in maintaining our membranes, such as in the lungs. An intact membrane will stop the virus from entering into our lungs and block it. Very important for immune defense. Vitamin A supports neutrophils, macrophages, and natural killer cells. It reduces the rates of infection when it's supplemented, and also death from coronaviruses. We don't have research yet on this coronavirus, but it reduces death from the other coronaviruses, and it's a necessary essential nutrient, so be sure you get it in the right form. Too much preformed vitamin A can be toxic. Over 5,000 IUs for elders, for instance, is not recommended. Vitamin D. Now, this is a very interesting Indonesian study. They looked at 780 confirmed cases of severe COVID-19. Those with low vitamin D levels were much more likely to die. Of 179 patients with deficient vitamin D, 2 people lived. 99% died. And yet, in 388 people with adequate vitamin D, over 30 nanograms per milliliter, only 4% died. You want to be in the 99% died or the 4% died? I'm going to stay in the 4% died. Make sure you have enough vitamin D in your body at all times. Very important, this book, Embrace the Sun, is written by my friend, Dr. Bill Grant. Excellent book. You should be sure to have at least 1,000 milligrams of vitamin D3 daily. Higher vitamin D, it just reduces death from COVID-19. It not only reduces replication, but it decreases inflammation. You need at least 1,000 IUs. The modern way of expressing this is 25 micrograms every day. And the tolerable upper limit is set at 4,000 IUs or 100 micrograms. And I will say that this is a very conservative upper limit. There is no problem for anyone ever taking 4,000 IUs a day or 100 micrograms a day. It is perfectly safe, and it's certified by many agencies in the US, Europe, and all over the world. I do recommend the vitamin D3 cholecalciferol form rather than the vitamin D2 ergocalciferol form. And of course, the best way to do this is to have your blood tested for vitamin D. And if you're fine, you're fine. If you're low, you need to supplement. Vitamin B12, very important. Did you know most vitamin B12 deficiency occurs in those who eat plenty of vitamin B12, but are unable to get it inside their bodies? It lowers the infection rates of COVID-19. It reduces severity of COVID-19, and vitamin B12 inhibits the viral replication of COVID-19. With sufficient levels of vitamin B12 and folate, the activity of immune cells are greatly enhanced. This is from a 2020 study on vitamin B12. Folate is named after green leafy vegetables, foliage. It's found in greens and beans, generally in food. The synthetic form is called folic acid, and that's found in supplements and fortified foods. There is a limit to how much folic acid, the synthetic kind, you can take, about 1,000 micrograms per day. Over that, you start raising your risk of cancer. Folate supplementation, when given to elderly individuals, improved their immune function, reversed the age-associated decrease in natural killer cell activity. This is very important that we reverse our age-associated impairment in immune function. Folate improved the killing of virus-infected cells and reduced infections. Now, vitamin C, we all know, is good for us, but it's surprising how many people don't get enough of it. It boosts the immune response to influenza, and it's required for limiting lung damage after influenza, especially with pneumonia, which can happen with COVID-19. Supplemental vitamin C stimulates phagocytes to destroy viruses. It decreases interferon. Remember, interferon is that signaling molecule that can go between cells and warn them of an invading pathogen. Stimulates T cell activity. Now, T cell activity is especially important because that can lead to memory so that we don't get COVID-19 repeatedly. We want to have our T cells stimulated with vitamin C. Also, natural killer cell activity is enhanced with vitamin C. Vitamin E, I have a few slides on this because it's just so important. As you'll see, the brain and body food on the left, this supplement I designed for my trial, which was the Hawaii Dementia Prevention Trial, that I designed and ran with a large team. It was very successful in stopping people from going into dementia. In fact, overall, they improved rather than got worse. And this brain and body food I developed for people who couldn't be in the trial, and it has most of the things in it, which is to say essential vitamins and minerals, but in the correct form and the correct amount. Now, vitamin E, at least 133 milligrams daily, that's 200 IU, raise immune response in the elderly 2 to 6 times compared to those with lower vitamin E. Who has lower vitamin E? 93% of Americans have low vitamin E. They don't get the bare minimum 15 milligrams a day. In fact, when you check diets, which I do with my Diet Doctor software, and I see how much vitamin E people are getting, even on vitamin E rich diets, like a raw food diet with lots of nuts and seeds, no one I've analyzed has ever gotten over about 45 milligrams per day. And yet they're finding in these studies that you really need well over 100, maybe 200 milligrams per day in order to get this effect of reversing the age-related decrease in immune power. The raised immune response from vitamin E attacked the influenza virus and limited death rates. This is from the Journal of the American Medical Association. Vitamin E, symbolized with this walnut, cuts pneumonia risk. Pneumonia is a common form of death for people with COVID-19. Anything that can cut the risk is a good idea. It is amazing that many doctors and hospitals have not looked into using vitamin E. Some are using vitamin C. Vitamin E stopped influenza from progressing to bacterial pneumonia. In a study of over 7,000 older people, vitamin E supplementation, they used only 50 milligrams per day, reduced incidence of pneumonia by 69 to 72%. That's huge. That's a lot less dead people. Vitamin E also reduces influenza virus in the lungs. Now, in this study, they reduced virus by 25 times in older, but only 15 times in younger mice, reversing age-associated decline in natural killer cells. So it's very important that we reverse this age-associated decline in immune power. Also, vitamin E increased beneficial T cells. Remember, they can be memory T cells, and they decrease prostaglandins. Prostaglandins can contribute to inflammation, especially the leukotrienes. Also, fever and pain from the prostaglandins. Vitamin E supplementation should only be taken in the RRR alpha tocopherol form and other natural tocopherols. The synthetic form, which is all racemic, it's a mixed form of alpha tocopherol, of which only one of the 8 parts is RRR alpha tocopherol. The other 7 parts are less effective, 4 are not effective at all, and the other 3 are very ineffective. Vitamin E can reduce the risk of a cytokine storm by limiting the COX enzymes, that's cyclooxygenase enzymes, and phospholipase. By doing this, they're effectively stopping a huge form of inflammation in the body from leukotrienes. It also, vitamin E, reduces pro-inflammatory cytokines, including tumor necrosis factor, which I've mentioned as being a powerful cytokine, and also interleukin 6. As I mentioned, less than 10% of Americans get even the minimum amount of vitamin E. We do need more vitamin E than we can get from our diet, and the supplementation in this study looked at 200 milligrams per day, that's about 300 IU, for 1 year in the elderly, resulted in lower incidence and shorter duration of upper respiratory infection, exactly what COVID-19 is all about. I want to mention selenium is an essential trace mineral. We need the right amount of selenium. Too much is bad, too little is bad. A diet with enough selenium decreases severe lung disease from influenza. Selenium helps decrease lung disease by decreasing pro-inflammatory cytokines and their chemokines. With enough selenium, there's an increase in anti-inflammatory signaling molecules. So you do need some. And you can get selenium from sesame seeds and sunflower seeds. Those are 2 excellent sources. We no longer recommend Brazil nuts as a form of selenium because of their tendency to bioaccumulate radioactive cesium. Zinc is well known to boost the immune system. In fact, during the COVID-19 crisis, zinc was unavailable at many stores because people were buying it out. Well, it doesn't work in a vacuum, but it is an important part. 30 days of low zinc intake can lead to 30 to 80% losses in immune defense capacity. How would you like to be without 80% of your immune defense capacity? The deficiency leads to reduction in T cells and B cells, which also affects your not only fighting COVID-19 the first time, but remembering how to fight it if you're exposed to it again, which is rather likely, isn't it? Low levels of zinc are more common in elderly individuals. Deficiency might be around 20%. This is from the Journal of Nutrition. Consumption of 45 milligrams of zinc was done in a study. I do want to mention that the upper limit for the day for adults and older children is 40 milligrams per day. So they went a little over the upper limit, and I never recommend anything unsafe. So I wanted to mention that you might want to stick to 40, not 45. But they did give this amount per day for a year, and it drastically reduced the incidence of influenza in elderly individuals. They could produce protective interferon A in amounts comparable to younger adults. So zinc is something you need to include. You can't be sure that you're going to get zinc every day. I know I analyze my own diet and I don't always get enough zinc, but I do take the Brain and Body Food supplement, which contains all of the micronutrients that I've mentioned during this talk. It's also designed based on my knowledge as author of the McGraw-Hill College textbook, Vitamins and Minerals Demystified. And I will say that at this moment, I'm up to having 9,320 peer-reviewed studies that I have renamed, saved, and read thoroughly and vetted as being very accurate, all on nutrition, and many of these do bear on how to make a good multiple vitamin and how to get the best form of each mineral and vitamin in the right amount. Now I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about some spices and medical plants that have excellent medical research backing them up. This is echinacea to start with, purple coneflower it's called. It stimulates the immune response, protects against viral infection specifically, reduces inflammation to help us keep away that cytokine storm, and reduces the risk of pneumonia after influenza. So I'm thinking that this might be a good thing to take only when you need it. It is not advisable to take echinacea for long periods of time. If you were starting to feel a little bit of a sore throat, weren't sure if it's COVID-19, weren't ready to see a medical doctor yet, you might want to try some quality echinacea tincture, either angustifolia or purpurea as used in this study, and see if that does it. If it doesn't, of course, you need to get proper medical advice. If you suspect you really do have COVID-19, get tested. Mushrooms have beta-D-glucan. Beta-D-glucan really activates the immune system, especially macrophages. It activates lung protective dendritic cells and also powers up the immune system by enabling T cells to work better. Maitake enhances the power of natural killer cells. There's a lot of excellent research on this. I'm quoting here a 2019 study that looked at the immune system and medicinal mushroom formulations that contain actually both maitake and reishi. You may not have heard of black cumin oil. It contains two substances, Nigellidine and Alpha-Hederin. They're found in the oil. They inhibited COVID-19 as well as the antiviral drug chloroquine, and better than favipiravir and the famous hydroxychloroquine. Ginseng, you may have heard of. It helps to protect us from a cytokine storm because inflammation and the amount of SARS-CoV-2 virus in the lungs were remarkably reduced by red ginseng coupled with vitamin C. Ginseng protects against inflammation by activating the toll-like receptor 4. I have not mentioned that, but it's very important in inflammation. Ginseng supports T cells and natural killer cells. Ginseng is a warming root that should not be used by people with bleeding tendencies, although in most people it does not encourage that at all. Astragalus, which we laughingly call tongue depressors because you see how they look like a slice of a root there, improved the survival rate of cells infected with influenza virus. They reduce damages during influenza. The antioxidant effects are through the superoxide dismutase pathway. They increase this enzyme that we make to protect us from oxidation and damage to the lung tissue. Inflammation is also reduced via the toll-like receptor and through interferon boosting, so it can warn other cells that there's a problem. Turmeric I've mentioned several times, and you might want to start including that in your meals. The fresh root is a nice way to do it. It can be grated and added to food. The powder is widely available too. As I mentioned, turmeric has components that block attachment and replication of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, blocking COVID-19. It also activates T cells, B cells, macrophages, neutrophils, natural killer cells, and dendritic cells. Just about every part of the immune system is boosted by turmeric. So this may help with the cytokine storm that can occur with COVID-19 lung infections. Curcumin from turmeric has been shown to block viral neuraminidase. It's an enzyme that enables the virus to be released from the host cell. So the way it works is the virus comes along and attaches to the cell receptor and gets into the cell. If it gets into the cell, it duplicates inside the cell. Then it needs to get out of the cell, many copies of itself, so that it can continue the infection and make it worse. But this viral neuraminidase is blocked by curcumin. So it stops the virus from being released from the host cell. This 2020 study reports that it can block the spread of these influenza viruses, COVID-19, inside the body. So just summarize briefly, what you've learned today is that you can reduce the risk of a cytokine storm. You can stop COVID-19 from attaching to our cells in a very simple, easy ways, safe ways, prevent replication of the virus inside our cells, and I just mentioned how you can block it from getting out of our cells. Get the nutrients that boost immune function, very important, and certain scientifically validated medical plants. This talk is based on my book, Beyond the Mask, How to Survive COVID-19, and there's much more in the book. I can't say more today, but please go to my website, drsteveblake.com, and you can get the book there. I'm offering it for $10 in a downloadable format so that no one is without it. If you've lost your job, just let me know and I'll send you a free copy. Okay, thanks for listening. Take care, stay safe and healthy.